about 10% of team performance is explained by individually my own state of energy and high performance. This kind of, do I feel like I'm great and I'm at my best? And so the better I am, the better the team performs, to about 10%. Very
Wow.
interestingly,
I thought it'd be
well,
higher. I thought
I
it'd
thought
be
it'd be
higher,
higher,
but
but very
okay.
interestingly, the other
Yeah.
way, so individually, how great I feel is about 30% affected by how well the team performs.
Welcome back to Rise and Thrive Conversations for Greatness, the podcast where we ignite your passion for personal growth, motivation, and success. I'm your host, John Merkus, and today we're excited to have Katie O'Keefe join us once again, diving into the transformative power of the body-brain reset, this time for teams, last time for individuals. So 3 months ago, Katie captivated us with her incredible transition from being a top-ranking triathlete to becoming a pioneering coach and entrepreneur, as well as her remarkable journey that included an impactful stint at Deloitte as the Director of Human Capital Consulting and then co-founding Structured Creative. Here, she masterfully combines structured problem solving, design thinking, and the latest in neuroscience to offer transformative solutions to both businesses and individuals. We heard all about the individual stuff last time in episode 13. We're going to be focusing on teams today. In today's episode, Katie is here to share insights into achieving the next level of excellence and innovation for teams through the body-brain reset. This groundbreaking program, designed by Katie, merges physical well-being with mental sharpness to unleash the full potential of teams, fostering a culture of comprehensive health and peak performance that accelerates personal growth and success. Be prepared as we discuss strategies for cultivating a powerful mindset, enhancing leadership skills, and building effective team dynamics. Katie's holistic approach seamlessly integrates physical fitness, cognitive development, and emotional intelligence, charting a course towards a well-rounded path to success. So whether you're a team leader, a team member, or on a personal quest for greatness, today's conversation will be filled with inspiring stories and actionable strategies to push you and your teams into new heights. Holy moly, I know I'm getting to you soon, Katie. Get ready as we embark on a journey to reset your body and brain for peak team performance under the expert guidance from the inspirational Katie O'Keefe. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, John, for that again epic introduction. It's great to be back. It's really good to be back.
It was quite epic. And listeners, I was just chatting to Katie before we hit the record button. I said, I've got a long intro, but I love it so much, I don't want to shorten it. And it's all, every word is factual, and really happy to have you back and our very first repeat guest. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back.
In the last episode 13, I got feedback across the globe. Many people saying how much they love that episode and they really got some great things from it. Big shout out to Renata Merkus from the Netherlands. Same surname, no relation.
Isn't that
That's a
funny?
whole other story, how
Yeah.
we know each other. But it's great to know that we're having impact all over the world. Sydney Blake made a point of reaching out and saying, I really loved listening to Katie, and many others. Specific shout out to Udara Fernando, who's a friend of the program. If you want to shout out and tell us how much you're loving these episodes and loving Katie, it's easy to do. Just email me, john@johnmerkus.com. And or Katie's details will be in the show notes as well. And I know you love to hear from people that are loving this kind of information.
Yeah. I look totally, I can't reinforce that enough, that when you and I sit here chatting about this, it's just you and I chatting about it. And there's always this wonder, like, is anyone listening? Do they like it? What do they think of it? So please, if you've listened and you like it, or you've listened and you've got a question, or you've listened and you don't agree with something, get in touch. Love to hear from you.
Fantastic. So yeah, last time was so awesome. We talked about the mindset, our mindsets, and bringing the knowledge of the science and living the practices so people can be their best every day. And I loved it how when you're we kind of said when you're at a party or when you're in an event, how you would introduce yourself and what you do. Now, there might be people that didn't hear episode 13 yet. Could you introduce yourself as you would if we were at a cocktail party? Let's say we're at I don't know, where are we? We're at some wonderful venue. I've got a lemon, lime and bitters in my hand, and I bump into you, Katie, and I say, "Oh, hi, I'm John Merkus," and then away you go.
Yeah, I say, hi, I'm Katie O'Keefe and I help people be great.
I love it.
Which usually is then greeted by, oh, really? Tell me more about that. So, the tell me more about that is I help people be great in three very specific ways. The first is you as an individual and how you tap into your great energy, great thinking, great mood that you know what it feels like when you feel great and how do you tap into that every day? How do you show up consistently both at work and in life? I think I said on the last podcast, I find in the world of work, particularly as you get into senior leadership roles, people tend to save their best selves for work and they are their, they manage their emotions, they stay calm, they have to solve complex problems, they have to think really hard on things. And then when they get home at the end of the day, they got nothing left and they're just kind of irritable and distracted and short tempered and often then beat themselves up a bit about that and go, oh God, I hate being like that at home with my kids, or I hate being like that at home with my partner. And so then they try to, swing the pendulum. And then, so they try to be really good at home and then they find they're not functioning as well at work. So how do you find the balance in that so that you're at your best in all facets of your life? So that's the first, working with the individual. And we talked a lot about that last time. The second way that I work with people then is in the context of teams and how do we make teams great? Teams in the working world is the unit of the organization. So it's the structural unit of the organization. It's where work gets done. It's where change happens. And it's usually where competency is built in an org. So if you think about how we build skill, how we build capability, how we build competency, how we build capacity in organizations, we do it in the context of teams. And yet, for most of us, I think we've resigned ourselves to the fact that teams are a bit shit. Like, working in teams is usually not very good. But we're kind of just accepting that fact and going, well, the dynamics won't be great. We'll waste a bit of energy. Meetings will be a waste of time. I probably won't feel like I'm heard. I might be distracted doing other things. But how do you make teams great? And that's been a passion of mine and a question of mine that I've been seeking an answer to, and that we've, with others, not just me on my own, really since 2015. So it's nearly 10 years. And then the third way in which I work with people and help people be great is then in the context of organizations. So this is a little bit different, where we start to think more about what are the systems within an organization that enable people to be great, and where are the systems in an organization getting in the way of people and blocking people. And I do that with a colleague of mine, Cass Spong. We do that work together that we call systems of well-being. If you wanted me back for a third time, you could have me back with Cass and we could talk about systems of well-being. Could be another whole topic, but I wouldn't want to push the friendship if I wasn't one.
No, I'd love to do that. I'd love to do that. And because I've never done, I was going to say something appropriate. I've never had three people on the call.
Right.
I think so. So that'll be that'll be interesting as well. I'd like to try that.
Yeah.
Or because we're in the same city, we might be able to do
one
live
in person. That'd be cool.
Which is will be another first for me. And I need to get on to doing that because, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going overseas in a month's time and I'm going to try and interview as many people as I can. So they'll be in person.
Yeah.
But enough about me. We're here about the body-brain reset for teams. Now, I hear what you're saying about, and I love your honesty. That's another thing I love about how you are, that sometimes teams are shit. And sometimes you're lucky and you're in a good one.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to be more by luck than design. And it can really depend on the makeup and the personas of the people in the teams as well. And like you say, sometimes you just shove together. When you think about it, taking a step back now, talking with you, when you think about it, sometimes you're not even asked or anything like that. It's like you're all in together, go and work, off you go.
Mm, yeah.
With no help.
with
With
no
no
with
help.
no help, and often, and we can talk about this, often with very little setup, very little understanding of the purpose of the team, the goals of the team, roles and responsibilities in
Yep.
the team, very little connection back to how does our team contribute to the broader organization, who are our stakeholders and what are our relationships with those people.
Mm, mm,
And so the
mm.
research that we've been doing really for the last 7 years has really been looking at what are the factors that define high performance in teams, and are those different in different contexts. So is a senior leadership team different to a sales team? Is that different to a quality team? Is that different to a project team? Is it different in the not-for-profit sector to the manufacturing sector so these are all questions that we're holding. We don't have answers to all these questions yet, but this is our pursuit, is to really understand this at the deepest level.
Right, got it. And I know there's all those agile ways of working people shouting at the podcast now, going, John, but what about teams that have a team charter? We make that ourselves and things like that. And yes, you're right. That is a great artifact to have. And what I love about a team designing their team charter is you do it together and you agree on it together. And it's about what's the goals of the team, who we are in the team, what's important to us, and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that doing that exercise, I encourage teams to do that. And in fact, I saw a version of that at my daughter's primary school,
Mm.
where they, as a class, they had some agreements as to how they want to operate, and they all had to sign it
Yeah, cool.
physically. And I thought that was a great idea. Well, what we're talking about now goes a bit beyond that. So that's a great artifact to have and a
Mm-hmm.
great experience to do, and to go back to this. So I'm interested in, we talked about some of the challenges. So what are those challenges that the teams are facing that the Body Brain Reset program can address? Had a couple of technical issues there, which we resolved, and then started talking about the program again. So, Katie, I think I'm not calling the program correctly, or I've got some misconception here, because I'm calling it the Body Brain Reset for teams, and it's not really that, is it?
So not entirely. The Body Brain Reset program that we talked about last time, we can run that for
Mm-hmm.
teams, where we take an intact team and we give them that whole experience of understanding how your body and brain work together as a system, with guided practices for movement, nutrition, sleep, and breath work. We can do that in the context of teams, and I have done it in the context of teams, and it is amazing, and I do love it. This is a little bit different. It's kind of an and to that, which is the individual being in the best state possible is one factor of team performance. And one of the things that we wanted to understand through this research is, to what extent does the individual being in the best state possible support high performance in a team, and the reverse. So to what extent does being in a great team actually help me be in the best state possible? And then at a deeper level, the real focus of the program or the research has been, how do we define team performance and how do we build great teams? So how do we really understand what makes a great team? And when I've talked to people about this, they kind of say to me, well, forgive me if I'm wrong, this might sound a bit dismissive, but hasn't that already been done? Don't we already know? And so if I wind back to 2015 for me, and this is where it all started, I had just returned from maternity leave back to Deloitte. In that context, when you're just back at work and you're what they call on the bench, so you're not on any client work yet, you kind of just get given whatever there is to do. Oh, can you work on this? Can you work on this? And at that time, Deloitte every year produces a research paper called the Human Capital Trends Report. And so what they do is they go globally, interview people in businesses, and understand what they see as the biggest trends and challenges facing organizations for the next year and beyond. And in 2015, the number one trend or challenge facing organizations from a people perspective was, organizations in the future will be a network of teams. And We had all these clients ringing us after this paper was released saying, we absolutely agree with this, and how do you make teams work? We just, we struggle with team performance. We don't really know how to make teams work.
Mm.
And so it just so happened, right place, right time, or however you might want to think of it. Because I was there and I wasn't on any client work, one of the partners came to me and said, Katie, we don't really have a team model that's a Deloitte team model. Can you go out and have a look at what's in the marketplace and pick one that we can start to work with our clients on? And and that's the beginning of the snowball,
Yep.
the first little roll, and it starts to roll down the hill. So we start looking at academic research, we start looking at popular models of team performance, we start looking at, in different contexts, like in sporting contexts and business contexts. And ultimately, what the conclusion that we came to was, there's so many different factors of team performance when you look at the academic research and you look at the popular models, but not one model or not one research or one approach covered all of it.
Yeah, because I guess we're trying to look for quickly tell us the 5 or 6 things we have to do so every team is great. And it doesn't
Yeah.
work that way, does it?
No, but also, so there was a couple of really big gaps we felt in this. So the first big gap was every model, every research approach, everything we looked at had a slightly different answer. So there was a question for us then around, well, what is the right answer? If all of these things are saying they're the right answer, what actually is the right answer? So that was the first question, or the first problem. The second problem we had, that when we look at academic research, and this is a really interesting aspect of academic research, is you want to be able to minimize the variables to show cause and effect and prove a hypothesis. And if there's too many variables, you can't really do that. So when you look at academic research, they'll look at one factor, maybe two, in the main, not all of it, but in the main. And so they want to isolate, team performance. All teams that have clarity of goals perform well, or 80% of teams with its clarity of goals perform well. But then another academic research paper will look at, well, teams that are able to have open and honest communication and frequent communication, teams that meet frequently, it'll be something like that. Those teams perform well. So therefore, we can say that team performance is a factor of frequency of communication. And you kind of go, well, what if you looked at both of those things, or three of those things, or four of those things? So the world of academia is kind of limited to the fact that you want to control the variables and study only a few things, and in lots of cases, just one. On an aside to that, with the Body Brain Reset program, I reached out to an academic in Tasmania and said, "Oh, I'm running this program. I'm getting really great results for my clients. We're doing all these different interventions, and we're getting these amazing outcomes." And this was a neuroscientist in Tassie. And she came back to me because I said to her, look, I'd love to partner with a university to maybe make this some academic research as well. And she came back to me and she said, oh, I just think you're just looking at too many factors. There's too many variables. It would be too hard for an academic institution to look at this and take this on board. And so I thought, well, there you go. There's more evidence to why we actually went down this path for teams.
Yeah, that's part of the problem, isn't it? Or part of the challenge, I should say, because we're all walking around carrying the most complex known object in the universe, which is our brains,
Yeah.
and so it makes things pretty complicated.
Pretty
Uh,
complicated. And so
yeah.
teams are complex, which is one of our findings. I'll come to the findings in a
Mm,
minute. But
mm,
so that was the first thing. The second thing, then, with the academic research that we struggled with was when you look at the approaches for the research, so how they have constructed the research approach, it typically brings in groups of students who volunteer their time for an hour at lunchtime or 2 hours in the middle of the day. And they come into an academic laboratory and they do a completely context absent task, like build a bridge
mm.
out of pasta. and and that's the context in which then they make conclusions about team performance.
Yep.
But that's devoid of relationships, agendas, business objectives, real world tasks, competing priorities. And one of our insights is context is critical. So,
Mm,
so to draw conclusions about team performance based on these student activities that aren't real world problems is problematic. I mean, yes, you can draw some conclusions on it, but it's missing, for us. And again, we're winding back to 2015 when we first started this. It's missing for us what is real in the teams that we're working
mm.
with in the business world.
I can definitely hear that because I did a personal development course once, and one of the things that stood out for me was they said the context is decisive, and then they gave examples of how that is. You're saying the same thing, and I can see that in the research, as you get a totally different outcome as to you doing it the first way you said with the students in that devoid of context, or whether you're doing it actually in the workplace with all the context setting that you were talking about.
Mm. So that's sort of the academic challenges we faced. And then when we looked at kind of the popular models that consultants are using in the marketplace to help their clients with team performance, again, there's a couple of challenges with them. So again, they all look at slightly different things, and we kind of felt like, well, what's the right one? And in trying to answer that question of what's the right one, most of them have no evidence base. So, people have done their own research, done their own work with teams, and kind of developed their own, here's our model, and then they
Mm.
go away and work with it. And yeah, you might get improved team performance, but there's no evidence base to say these are the right factors, or that these factors cause each other in the way that they say they do. So, a really good example is Lencioni's five dysfunctions of a team. It's a really popular model, people love it. It's presented as a pyramid of hierarchical dysfunctions, and therefore you need to make sure you have these conditions in place in order to get to the outcome. And it starts with trust as the first dysfunction, and then moves to conflict, and then moves up to a final dysfunction is we don't achieve our outcomes. But there's no evidence to say it starts with trust. There's no evidence to say that this is a hierarchical model that structures itself in this way.
Right.
And our data actually says no, that it doesn't start with trust, and it doesn't work that way. Over time maybe it will, but our data at the moment doesn't support that.
That's one of the things that struck me last time we spoke, and this time as well, is that you are basing what you're saying and the programs that you develop on evidence, on research, on science. So I'm not just telling you this because it feels good. Well, you might be as well, but it's like we know that this works because of these reasons and these studies. That's mind blowing. That's I don't know what the words are, but it's bloody great.
So helping people be great. Because I think,
Yeah.
John, we're kind of talking about this, and it's like, what's really important to me. And I did this exercise with a friend of mine the other day, a purpose and values elicitation for work, and it was kind of coming back to what's most important to me in my work. And for me, what was revealed is it's helping people, but it's helping people with a deep sense of efficacy, in that if we do this thing, it is going to work. It's
Yeah.
like, I don't want you to give me your time and your money and your effort with a kind of, is this going to pay off? And I think with teams in particular, how many times have we been involved with team building exercises that you go into it going, oh God, eye rolling, and kind of this sense of dread around, oh God, we're going to do a team building exercise, and it doesn't make any difference at all, or even worse than that. And I've heard lots of stories of where it then creates worse team performance,
Hmm.
not better
Hmm.
team performance.
Especially if you drop someone during the trust exercise. But
I know, it's like, oh God, really, we have to do trust falls, really? It's like, oh God.
yeah, yeah. Well, and so yeah, so you're saying about that efficacy. So you have confidence when you're delivering and talking about these programs because you know that it works based on the evidence and the research. that you are doing. Love it.
Yeah. So that was the third thing. Then the fourth big challenge that we faced was when you look at, again, most of the models of team performance, and there's kind of two factors to this. One is, what is the definition of high performance?
Good
And
question.
usually what the model is looking at is what we would call team effectiveness, which is like interpersonal dynamics. So it's looking at the team as what we call a closed system, or like as if the team exists in a bubble and it's only that team without a relationship with other teams or without a relationship with the broader organization. So it's the team in isolation. Whereas what we know about teams in organizations is that they exist within the context of the broader organization, and how that team understands how it fits within that broader organization, how it feels supported by the broader organization, how it feels it's able to work effectively with other teams in the organization, and then more specifically, who are the stakeholders of the team and how do we work with our stakeholders. And there's very few models, there are a few exceptions, but there are very few models that ask a team to consider how it fits within the broader context as part of the performance of the team. And so we felt that was something really important to study from a how much does this matter. And again, insights, it matters a hell of a lot. It matters a hell of a lot more than you would think, and a lot more than other things that you would think would be really important.
Right. So what I'm hearing is people in a team really want to understand the bigger picture
Mm,
and how they contribute to that.
absolutely. Yeah. Which then brings me
Right.
to the last factor, which is when we consider the definition of team performance, the definition that we are taking, and when we're looking at team outcomes, so what do teams achieve to be high performing, we're looking at three very distinct outcomes. The first is that we achieve our goals. So a team exists for a reason to do something and achieve something, and you've got to achieve those things to be considered high performing. The second factor of performance is how the group interacts together and how effective is that. And so that includes things like, are we good at making decisions together? Are we good at solving problems together? Are we good at being creative and innovative together? And are we good at executing together?
Yeah, I guess that makes sense because you don't want to achieve your goals by any means possible and the team's
And the
unhappy.
team's
So,
unhappy. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
gotcha. So, get your goals, then look at how you're interacting and all that.
And
Yeah.
then the third factor is individually, what's my experience like in the team? Do I have a positive experience being part of this team? And the positive experience individually is defined as, do I feel like I'm able to contribute my best to the team? And do I get something in return? Do I get a sense of satisfaction, fulfillment, learning, and growth in return? And
Mm.
again, if you kind of think about those three very distinct outcomes, I think we can all think of times when we've been on a team that maybe it's been a really great team to be a part of. It's actually been really fun. We've worked together really well, but we didn't actually achieve our goals. Maybe because we didn't even know what our goals were, but we kind of had a great time, but it felt like, well, what are we here for? Or maybe we've been on a great team that we've really smashed our KPIs out of the park, but it was very much an individual show and we didn't work well together as a group. Or maybe, yeah, collectively we had pretty good dynamics, but for me individually within the team, I felt marginalized. I felt like I wasn't valued. I didn't really enjoy that team very much, not
Mm.
because of not because of any other factor other than that I just didn't feel valued in the team.
I think you're right that we've had those experiences, and because no one like yourself has come to the team and said, "Okay, let's look at these things and see how we can improve them and what you need as an individual, as a team, and how you fit into everything." You got to get this thing to everyone in the world because there's not a team I've been in that does this to begin with, apart from maybe doing a team charter
Yeah,
or something
something
like
like
that.
that.
But really saying, based on research, we need to do this and we look at this. But I would also imagine it's not a one and done thing. So
Mm.
you'd have to have that ongoing coaching to make sure that I guess the teams are on track. Is that true enough thing to
So
say?
the really interesting thing with our research has been, so when we work with teams, we go through a really deliberate process up front, and we do the assessment with teams. And so on the assessment, this comes to the teams are complex element. So we designed an assessment that had 200 questions in it, over 200 questions in it, that was looking at around 20 factors of team performance. And we looked at those 20 questions. How are we hypothetically grouping them into factors of performance? And through the two rounds of statistical analysis now we've done on that data, we've been able to eliminate about 20 questions and about three factors of performance. So our assessment still has 200 items, so 200
Mm-hmm.
separate questions, and those
Mm-hmm.
200 separate questions then hierarchically group into 17 factors of performance. And when we look at the statistical significance and the relationship between those factors and the causal effect between those factors, we actually can't eliminate any more. They
Mm.
all play a role in some way, and they're all
Yep.
important to different extents. But it's really interesting. So if you're looking at it, you've got someone saying to you, oh, yeah, we've got this 20 question assessment of team performance. We want everyone to answer these 20 questions. It's like, well, what's missing from those 20 questions? And I think what's really relevant around that is that when we look at how much of team performance, and so we say these outcome factors, is explained by our factors of performance. So, in the statistical world, what you're trying to understand is, if this is what we're measuring, to what extent does all the things that we're taking into consideration explain the variability? And for us, depending on what we're looking at in terms of those three outcomes, it's somewhere between 60 to 80% of the variability in performance is explained by our model. So even with 200 questions and 17 factors, there's still somewhere between 20 to 40% of team performance which is unexplained by our model.
As you were saying that, I could hear some people saying 200 questions. Wow, that's a lot. But then I was also thinking, well, it makes sense that you want to be comprehensive up front, because the more information you have to work with when you start, the better the outcomes you can produce during the
During the
process.
process. And the more, and even then, as I say, it's not explaining 100% of the variability. So there's still other things going on in teams. Now, which brings me back to the intersection between individual and team performance. We have looked at that data as well. And what we think as an early sort of finding, and we need more data on this though, is that about 10% of team performance is explained by individually my own state of energy and high performance. This kind of, do I feel like I'm great and I'm at my best? And so the better I am, the better the team performs, to about 10%. Very
Wow.
interestingly,
I thought it'd be higher.
well,
I thought
I
it'd
thought
be
it'd be
higher,
higher,
but
but very
okay.
interestingly, the other
Yeah.
way, so individually, how great I feel is about 30% affected by how well the team performs and what it's like being in the
Right.
team. So
Yep.
so we're kind of getting up to, with the team, if we take our team assessment in with individual performance, we're getting up to around 70 to 90%. So which is actually, in the world of social sciences, is very, very good. So, we've got a
Mm,
very, again,
mm.
come back to the evidence, the confidence. It's a robust model, and we feel really confident that if a team engages with us to answer this assessment and get the data back, they will immediately start to improve, which is another really fun fact. So there was one academic research paper we found which asked the question, does just doing an assessment lead to improved performance? And it kind of goes to the physics principle of, you can't measure something without changing it, that as soon as you measure it, you change it.
Yeah.
And this academic paper did in fact find that. So what they did is they gave teams an assessment of team performance to complete and did nothing else. They didn't give them a report, they didn't give them a debrief, they didn't tell them how they did on the assessment, and then they reassessed them later, and all teams had improved. So just the very process of going through and answering
Yeah.
all these questions leads people to start to think differently about, okay, how do we perform better?
Yeah, because you're taking a step back, thinking about it, like because you're in it, you might not be thinking about it. What's that saying about the fish? The fish doesn't know it's in the water, or something like that. I don't know. So you take a step back, you have a think about it, you answer those questions. I could see just by doing the assessment that would lead to a bit of a uh, moving the dial. But then, of course, then if you use that information to really take some action and get some deeper learnings, of course, you're going to have better. Well, I say of course, but it
Makes
makes sense
sense.
that you would have better
Yeah.
performance.
And so, on your question then about ongoing coaching, coming back to that question, so we get everyone to do the
Mm,
assessment, we prepare a report, we debrief that report. And then what we do with the report is we say to the teams, okay, so this is your data. This is what the data says you're good at and not good at. What do you want to be better at? How do you want to improve? And we work with them to develop a roadmap, a 6 month roadmap. What are we going to work on, when, and why? And I then give teams the options, or we then give teams the option of saying, we can stay involved with you over the next 6 months and coach you through this process. Or if you feel like you've got it from here, take it. We want to
mm,
actually kind of see, do you need to be coached or not? And the
yep,
really interesting thing is, all the senior leadership teams I've worked with had said, no, Katie, we need you to keep coaching us, because
yeah,
senior leadership teams are extra complex because of the kind of egos and the level of people that you're talking about, and this it's a bit of a beast, senior leadership teams. And so
mm,
often
mm,
they feel like they need that external voice to help manage those dynamics and hold them to account.
yep.
I've had, so it's about a third, a third, a third. So I've had about a third of the team say, no, Katie, we want you to stay involved. About another third of the team say, no, no, we've got it from here, we're good. And they do an amazing job. And about another third of team say, no, no, we've got it from here, we're good. And then about 2 months later, they go, no, no, we don't have it, we need you.
I wondered about that. I did wonder about. Yeah, I've got it. Oh, this
This
is
is
harder
harder than
than
I
it looks
thought.
like. Maybe. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's a really good way to do it, because you're not saying to people, I want to lock you in for this amount of time and rub your hands together or whatever. It's like the best outcome. The teams get to decide, and I've always found that when the teams decide, it works. It works
It
really
worked.
well.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so I love that you give that experience, and I also love that people try it and then need to call you
Yeah.
back.
And I stay in touch. What I normally do is send fortnightly reminders to the teams. And
Mm,
so if they've got
mm,
about 5 months, I send about 10 reminders, where I send a
mm,
reminder
mm.
saying, on your roadmap, you're going to be working on this for the last fortnight. Here's some reflection questions. Have you done it? Da, 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 da. And normally that is enough for teams to go, oh, shit, yeah, we said we were going to do this and we haven't done it. And I have had a
Mm,
couple of teams in response to those reminders then reach back out to me and say, actually, we're completely off track with our roadmap. We really need you to come back in and get us
yeah.
back on track, and which is great. So I'm really happy to do it. And what I love about it, and what I love about the model and the comprehensiveness of the model, is every team I've worked with in developing their own roadmap has had a combination of things that they need to do within the team themselves to be better at. And that might be, every team's has identified they need to clarify their purpose and goals. Every single team has, we need to understand why we exist as a team. Most teams then do something around some of the processes in the teams, around how do we make decisions, how do we seek out different perspectives, how do we solve problems, how do we hold each other to account. So there'll be a range of processes that they want to be better at. And then every single team I've worked with has identified elements of how they relate to the broader organization that they need to be better at. And I've worked with one organization where we've worked with multiple teams. And what I've loved about this sort of setting has been, the product development team or the innovation team has said, we need to have a better relationship with the sales team, because the sales team are out there knowing what our clients want, and so we need to understand what the clients want so that we can build that. And then the sales team has said, we need to have a much better relationship with the planning team, because we need to make sure that we've got the inventory in stock that we want to sell to our clients. And so there's been this sort of lovely kind of cascading effect of, we need to have a close relationship with this team, we need to have a closer relationship with that team. And when you think about that on an organizational setting, and the organization as a
Can you believe it? Katie's Bluetooth headphone and microphone ran out of battery. So, just for a little while there, while it's getting charged, we had to use a different mic and headphones. It doesn't sound as good, but the information is awesome. Then she recharges. Then we get the sound back. Bear with us because it's absolutely gold. She's going to keep talking about one of the aspects of dealing with the teams is that they want to know what's going on with all the other teams in the organisation and they want to have better communication with them. Here she comes. Back to you, Katie.
And then the other thing that I've really appreciated about this process is every single team we've worked with in developing their roadmap has identified that they want to do things better with other teams in the organisation and understanding how they fit within the broader organisational picture. And so this one organisation that I've worked with, where I've worked with multiple teams, the product development team, which is responsible for innovating new products, has identified that they need to have a better relationship with the sales team so that they have a better connection to what customers are asking for, so they're developing products that the customers want. And then the sales team have identified they need to have a better relationship with the planning team so that the planning team know and have the right inventory in stock to sell, so they're not over-promising things to customers that they can't deliver on, and that everything's more efficient and more cost efficient as well. And so when you think about this, I love the idea that organizations are a system of teams, a multi-team system. When you get this, and you kind of think, if you kind of visualize in your head cogs that connect together to make up the whole working mechanism, one team is connected to another team and they realize that they're connected. So they actually start working together better. And then there's another team involved and they realize how they're interconnected. And so all of a sudden, all these things are spinning in a way in which they're influencing each other, but in a really well-planned, well-thoughtful way. Yeah. Then that improves organizational performance. And then I've had other teams, which has been really interesting, where they're teams that are critical to the success of the organization, and the organization know this and really appreciate the value that they give. But when you interview the team, they say, we don't actually understand how we fit within the broader organization. We don't really understand how we help the organization deliver its goals. And in playing this back to, the managing director or the CEO, they're kind of a bit disbelieving. They're like, really? They don't know that? I can't believe that. Like, they are so important to us. And so you go, the data suggests, no, they don't really understand. And so that is such an easy fix, because then the CEO or the managing director spends time with that team to say, gosh, this is our strategy as an organization. This is where we're headed. These are our goals and our targets. And this is the critical role you play in helping us achieve those goals and differentiating us in the market. And then they're like, wow, that's cool. We didn't know that. And so suddenly their work has a much greater sense of purpose.
It's amazing, and it's not at the same time. And what I mean by that is it makes so much sense. You've just got to be asked. If you're asked,
yeah,
like you said, who do you want to have a better relationship? Which team do you want to have a better relationship with? Oh, no one's ever asked us that. We've had some ideas and thought, oh, Jesus, this would be better if we had a better relationship with the sales team, but oh well. But then to actually be asked and then action taken to facilitate that, and then finding out maybe they want to have a better relationship with you too, and what can you do to achieve that? And then that happens in all relationships, that taking for granted. Oh, they just know. They just know how important they are. Of course they know, because without them they wouldn't know, but it's and they might know, but they need to hear it from you, because that's what will make the difference.
That's what makes it. And, the other thing that's so amazing about this is the data that we collect is each team member answers this survey saying, to what extent do I believe the team does this? To what extent do I agree with this? To what extent, are we good at this? And so it's one of the limitations in our work is that the the assessment of performance is subjective based on the perception of individual team members. So it's not an objective measure of team performance in the sense that this team needs to achieve these KPIs, and do they achieve these KPIs? As an aside, we did want to do that, but the funny part is, in talking to teams at the start of this process, what are your objective KPIs? Most teams don't have any. And when we did start this process, it was the middle of COVID, and so we do this longitudinal approach where we do a first measure, a second measure, and in some cases a third measure. And during COVID, when we went back to the teams to say, and where are you at with your objective KPIs, they were like, COVID has just stuffed everything. So we've had to accept and kind of be satisfied with this subjective measure of performance, as in the self-report of the team members, which is good. It's fine. We want to add to this now a view of the stakeholders of the team as another view of performance. So, if you've got who does the team report to, and what's that person's perception of the team performance? So we want to add that to it, which would be really interesting. But even with that as a measure of our subjective performance, we see that teams improve over time. And when we play this data back to the teams and we show them their report, there's this kind of really interesting thing that happens where it's like, I'm not the only one who feels this way. Isn't that a relief?
Yeah.
And suddenly all these things that have been bothering people that nobody's talked about, they have permission to talk about it. And there's safety to talk about it.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, so I'm not the only one who feels this way. I worked with one team. It's the worst performing team I've worked with in terms of the numbers, the scores that they got. It was awful. And when we did the debrief, I said, how do you guys feel about this? Like, how does this data make you feel? And they were like, it's pretty grim. I feel a bit, it's a bit depressing. I don't really like it. And one of the guys in the room goes, I am so relieved. I'm so relieved that this is out there now and that we can talk about it and do something about it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that happens in business, in teams, and in personal life as well, where someone will start saying some things that you're feeling and you go, oh yeah, I'm not the only one. That makes a big difference to be able to bring that safety in to talk about. I'm interested about remote teams as well, and how this, because that's been a big factor and impact out there in the workplace.
Yeah.
I would imagine this kind of program transcends that, or is inclusive of all that, because it would have to be. But I'm really interested in your insights in that whole remote work situation and high performing teams.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that. So one of the factors that we are measuring is a factor that we call team proximity, and that is how often and how many people in the team are located together physically. Now, in the context of when we started this work, we actually started the research in COVID when everyone was in lockdown, so everyone was remote. And then we've continued this work out of lockdown. We've got to do more analysis on this data yet, but what we are seeing as an initial trend is that teams that are located together more often perform better. So there is a relationship between the proximity of the team and how well we work together. And what those teams do better together is creative problem solving. So when you've got a problem that you need to solve and you need to explore different perspectives and look at different ideas and think about different options and solutions and make decisions together on those things are more effectively done physically located together.
Yeah.
And that finding from our data certainly isn't controversial or contradictory to anything else that's out there. I have seen quite a few things published recently that it looks to be 2 to 3 days a week together seems to be about the sweet spot when you look. So there's this kind of increasing performance and then decreasing performance, or flattening at least. And so if you can be together 2 to 3 days a week, that seems to make a difference.
Right.
And that it's these kind of things that require us to be listening to each other, considering different ways of thinking, this kind of creative collaboration or creative problem solving, appears to be done more effectively.
Oh, it's a cliffhanger. Is it done more effectively in the workplace, or is it done more effectively by working at home and collaborating that way? We will find out in part 2. We spoke for ages, so part 2 is about the same length as part 1. Wanted to split it up for you, and there's so much gold about teams, and she goes into the research and the 4 things that you can do as a team right now to make your team more effective and high performance. She goes through that and then has an incredible offer at the end of part 2 that if you're in a team, you definitely should take up. It's free. It's exclusive to Rise and Thrive listeners. Look forward to next week, part 2 with Katie O'Keefe. Love you a long time.